the purity of just being present and opening your heart to the moment and tapping into those things that just brought you joy as a child, even as an adult right now. Like, we're so busy chasing things. And at the end of the day, I'm like, do you know why you did that? Do you know, like, and myself included, folks.
No,
I think
yeah,
that
same.
I constantly, like you, I went for a drive today too and was like, what podcast can I listen to? And then I put music on and I was like, next track, next track. I need to find the one that's for me. Like, I had to make everything so,
Yep.
so aggressive and frantic, right?
Yeah.
And I literally came home frantic, and I had to just remind myself, like, everything's okay.
So welcome to the Tea On, where we typically sip tea and we talk about things that matter. But a little birdie told me that you have cacao, and that is so overwhelming and so fitting, so fitting, because obviously you're a woman of many trades, but like the driving force behind the reason why I wanted to have you be the participant in this conversation is because you have led me and just held me so deeply and beautifully during your cacao ceremonies and the way that you facilitated those spaces. And it's not only awakened my relationship with being intentional with my ancestral healing, but also just like how to ritualize my day a bit more and how to be just more present with what I'm consuming and how intentional I am with that. So we'll get all into it. But just first and foremost, I want to say the fact that you're drinking cacao right now is just
On brand.
on brand. It's fitting. It's giving very much branding. So for those of you who don't know, this is my queen, Stephanie Madrid. She's a writer, she's a creative, but of course, once again, the glue to why you're here today is the fact that you're just a cacao facilitator, but one that does so with such intentionality. You're inclusive as well. And just you like know how to facilitate like love in a very, very specific kind of way. So before I continue to babble on, just let the people know kind of who you are and yeah.
Sure. First of all, that was so sweet. I'm right, and because I think I'm drinking cacao, like my eyes are tearing up because it just
Obviously.
makes my heart open and just
Yes.
feels so like in the moment. Yeah, I have recently been doing cacao facilitation. I started with our sisterhood, Goddess Council, and I've just been trying to approach cacao facilitation from absolutely an accessible point, but also to be inclusive and to kind of lay down the over ceremonializing of cacao as well. I think it's definitely a trend and it's something that I'm excited to also explore at some point, but I really wanted to strip it of all its things and actually just facilitate it in a way that's more about connection and conversation and dialogue and information about what it is, because I think what I encountered was there was definitely a strong spiritual community that absolutely knows about cacao and its medicine and all the beautiful stuff. But then the average woman that I was friends with had no idea what cacao was, why I was drinking it, and was just curious about it. So it was really just a great space to start opening up and discussing cacao and why it's beautiful and its ancestry and its lineage. And what kind of blew me away, especially in those first few sessions that I did, how many women immediately felt connected to cacao, because for a large part of them, it's in their ancestral lines and in their lineage that probably some ancestor at some point drank cacao ceremonially in their life, but it was never carried down just because of colonization and because of just the way the world worked, right? And now we're back and we're being reintroduced, which is wonderful. So yeah, that's kind of my my story around cacao.
Oh, I love it. And I will say, as someone who's had like the blessing of being part of these ceremonies, which mind you, I've participated in cacao ceremonies like in person as well. And as special as they've always been, there's something so particular about the fact that like you are able to make us all feel so connected and so open, even like virtually, which can almost seem like counterintuitive to like the whole like, but you do so beautifully. And so one of the huge takeaways I've gotten from every ceremony has just been how deeply it's connected me and like alarmed me about like my ancestors and like the communication that I can have with them simply within ritual and simply within like doing these practices that I know they did. And so just opening up that like part of the conversation, how did cacao come about for you and what role did it play in you connecting like with your ancestral line?
Oof, I might cry for this one. Give me a cry question.
That's
right?
the goal.
You know, it came to me when we were in lockdown during 2020. So I had been looking at Instagram profiles with different people that I was following that would talk about drinking cacao. And there was specifically one influencer that I loved her content, and it was always so beautiful and sacred. And she was just always talking about slowing down. And then she would have this beautiful mug with like this chocolate drink in it. And I remember, you know, prior to 2020, I would just kind of scroll past it, be like, oh, that's cool and whatever. Once things like slowed down for the whole world and I was on the gram a lot more, I realized, okay, what is she talking about? What is this chocolate drink? I kind of remember having chocolate when I was a little kid, and not Swiss Miss, which we've all hopefully had. But for me, it was I went to El Salvador when I was a kid every year. And it was really common to go to like a restaurant till this day and be able to order a chocolate, which was chocolate. And I would get really excited as a kid, but it wasn't sweetened and it was really like heavy. So it was a very intense drink to have as a kid. But I was always curious about it. But then I honestly, in the last decade that I haven't been back to El Salvador, I completely forgot that that was a thing. So when I started seeing these posts, I was like, oh, I really need to figure this out. And she started offering some sort of kind of cacao portal. And I signed up. It was like a 5-week course. And I got to connect with other women drinking cacao. I was blown away by the immediate, and I think most of the people that I work with so far, every time you have the first time you have cacao, it's definitely like a subtle thing that happens, but you feel like this medicine in your body. You feel like the opening, right? And I was like, what is this, you know, witch's brew? Like, I just don't, like, I never understood. And then, you know, in the course, I started learning obviously about its history and its lineage. And I was like, interesting. It's really coming from Central America. It's coming from South America. It's coming from parts of Africa. I was like, this really has ancestral roots. And what I was most surprised by was I was maybe one of 2 women of color in that space. And it was, you know, it was just appalling to me that I wasn't aware of this medicine, and I wasn't aware of how much it's kind of grown into this spiritual culture, right? And I was like, wait a second, this is insane. So thankfully that space was super safe, and those women like held me so great. I mean, we were going through a lot of social upheaval around that time, and I remember experiencing such a release by having cacao. I would often come in crying, and the women facilitating it also did it with such love. Like, there was never an agenda on the table. It was very much about creating a dialogue and creating a safe space for conversation. And I love that. I love that that's exactly how cacao was introduced to me. But then my curious mind just needed to go further and dig deeper into this. So I started going down every rabbit hole and started looking at everyone who, you know, sources the cacao and brings it to people.
Right.
And it was just, I don't know. I guess, you know, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I really started to see this slow opening of here's what you can do with cacao, right?
Yeah.
I had to work with it a long time by myself. Most of 2020 was me just, okay, I'm going to keep trying this thing. And I would battle with coffee with it. I was like, do I want coffee or do I want cacao? Cacao doesn't wake me up. Cacao actually makes me want to go to bed and cry myself to sleep because it was just making me experience so many deep emotions. I felt like I was in a roller coaster constantly. So I started experiencing this very kind of this relationship with it, in that tumultuous, I guess is the word, is like I wanted to have it. It was delicious. It was also bringing such joy into my life and helping me be present. But it was also making me curl up and think about, you know, was I happy? Was I being honest in my relationships? Was I being honest, you know, with myself? And just a lot of journaling and a lot of writing started coming out naturally. And then I started asking questions. I started asking my mom, like, do you have experience drinking cacao? And she had never heard of it. And, you know, it just started to open up all these avenues of where did this come from? Why did we forget about it? And where, you know, where do we pick it up again and how do we use it? You know, because I do see people making money off of it.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we don't do that, or at least I don't abuse what this medicine meant to people, you know, thousands of years ago. So it's been a lot in terms of figuring out that relationship.
Oh my God. And I just think it's so beautiful how sort of like the healing that it provided you also was found in like the destruction of you. Like it kind of pulled you apart, which I just like in the few instances that I've experienced it, I will say there's such an opening that you really have to be like mentally prepared for. And I will say this isn't something they sort of play with surface level or to even commercialize. And that's why it's so beautiful to do it within sisterhood and within ceremony, because you guys like you end up really holding each other and really sharing this like sense of vulnerability. And I just it's something that's really incredibly heart opening. So I can imagine like incorporating it like regularly, like where is that balance? Because at some point I'm sure you have to find like some settling, right?
Yeah. My biggest advice when doing it now is, I guess it's the same advice that we're hearing across the board. It's listening to yourself and listening to your body when enough is enough. You know, I remember there was moments where I was showing up to it every day. Like I have to make my cacao in the morning. And I realized how militant I was trying to be about even that.
Yeah.
And I was showing up and I was like, I need to have cacao. I need to like make sure it's part of my routine. It's going to make me healthy. It's going to, you know, and I think it was my partner. He was like, you seem really stressed out. Of like,
of like something that's supposed to be like the complete opposite. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He was like,
you tend to do that.
You have the option to like set this down, pick it up when you need to. And I think it was also just that transition of that time where we were like trying to grasp onto our old life, you know, and then also try to enter this new space with the same old stuff, right? We were trying to be like, okay, I'm gonna get back into this world in a routine. It's gonna be new. Yes, I'm home, but it's gonna be different, right?
Yes.
And I was like, cacao's gonna be my thing. I'm gonna like do the cacao thing. And cacao as a spirit was like, girl, no, like I am not a thing to just be used. I'm here to help you feel. Like I really started to feel like it was having a conversation with me. And it's like, you can continue to push through, or you can realize that what you're doing. I think the first lesson for me was overly scheduling my life, like overly or trying to fit even rituals into some sort of system and framework, instead of actually, what I'm learning now is feel your way through these experiences, like allow your body to guide you through cacao or through anything you're doing. At this point, cacao is the gateway, I mean, can we say this, gateway drug that like led me to just being more open to ritualizing everything.
Yes. Oh my God. I
kind of mentioned too. Yeah.
I just think like the most, it brought to the surface how healing it is to simply be intentional. And I think how lost you get when you move through life with like such a state of autopilot and like living by a block schedule. I feel like it really brought me back. And that's what's so beautiful in terms of like how it led me through ancestral healing. And so I'm so curious to know, because when you have like these conversations with cacao and like even the nectar of that lesson, right? Like slowing down and being led, I would assume that's derivative of how our ancestors experienced cacao, right? And how they were sort of led. And so do you find that like it's facilitated like a direct communication with like, how do my ancestors live and how can I incorporate more of that into where I'm at now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not even I think sometimes when we think about ancestry, we think that it's like your indigenous ancestor from like, you know, eons ago, which is great and fine.
Yeah.
But it's actually even connected me more specifically to my living ancestors and the ones that I may have known one generation before.
Right.
So one thing I recently learned about, or not learned about, but just kind of studied for myself through writing was, oh, my mom and dad are like the experts of living slow. Like they've always lived without this kind of rush to get through life, you know? Like absolutely they came to this country and had to kind of live the American dream for a while and push themselves to buy houses and get us to school and do all the things. But I don't know if intermixed with that was like our Salvadoran culture and that, and my dad's also lineage, he's Italian as well. Like, I don't know if somewhere in there was like a seeping in of that, like living a life, like we have a term within our family, there's two terms, when you're like translate it, it's like living like a piece of lettuce or living a life like grapes. And the idea is that you kind of just chill, you know, like you're just your juiciest when, and you're most vibrant when you just allow life to be, instead of trying to your point, autopilot everything and get everything done. It's like there's such a ritualistic way of living in our cultures just one generation ago, that doesn't necessarily fit the capitalist kind of culture that we grew up in, right? And then add like technology and add all that stuff, which is all exciting, but I think it all put us into hyperdrive because we have just been like, a lot of us are going through this unshedding of like, stop moving at 60 miles per hour every day, you know, like your body needs rest just like nature does. And I think that's what cacao also brings to the table, is like, if you think about this thing, it comes from a tree. A tree is not out there making moves every day, it's just taking its time growing. And I think, you know, to best answer your question, I think this practice has like really led me to connect with the simplicity and the simple joys that my mother and my father had, that sometimes I took for granted as their child. And it's making me realize that I have the same capacity. So as much as our ancestors brought us trauma and continue to relive their trauma, and we're the generation who's trying to break those generational curses,
Right.
we are also descendants of people who knew how to live a slower life. So how can we take some of those kind of wins with us as well? We don't only have to focus on the healing of the trauma. That's traumatic in itself, and we may not figure it out all in one lifetime. You know, we're the bearers of starting that process, which is awesome, you know. So I'll leave it there.
I'm sitting here like, why am I not taking notes, bro? I'm so glad I'm like gonna be able to rewatch this when I edit it, because you just dropped such important gems. And it's funny because that's such a loud lesson in my life right now. I realize that like my body is responding to like the overstimulation of my life very viscerally. And I didn't really realize until I started to incorporate more slow and intentional ritual like cacao, because of how good it felt in my body to like settle in that moment and be led by feeling. Instead of like abiding by this regimen that is not even innately mine, but rather like something that's been, you know, told at me. And it's been the most freeing thing to come like sort of back into contact with. And I think it's such an important thing that you brought up, this idea that like, I think we're really led by like, you know, sort of like breaking these generational curses and coming back to like the nectar that we actually can take from the way that they lived, right? And recognizing that our descendants, they were absolutely just so they walked with ease, right? And you know, we're just like we're racing to get literally nowhere and to be burnt out when we get there. And I think that's the most beautiful part of what cacao has brought into my awareness. And so for anyone watching who is kind of I think wanting to, or is starting a journey towards like ritualizing more, right? Because I think making things ritual is one large step into being more like awake with life. So like, what is a piece of advice that you would give them in terms of like, I just want to start living more intentionally, connecting with my ancestors through that slow living? What would you say?
Ooh, I have a few ideas. I would say the one that's been helping me recently too is think about, and again, I'm sure this is repeated advice from other people, but it's still useful. Connect back with who you were as a kid.
Yeah.
Because the other thing I'm realizing as well is like there's ancestry, but then there was you and your bio individuality when you were born, right?
Yeah.
For example, I was a kid who I could literally be in my own bubble for hours. Like, I was just not fazed by the world. And then when I did interact with the world, I was like, oh my God, life, so cool, you know? And I was just so enamored by people and plants and, you know, but otherwise my world was my imagination, and I could literally live in that forever. I mean, I always feel connected to you because all the stuff you post about inner child work, I'm always like, yes. Oh my God, like the Rugrats shirts you wear, all that stuff. It's like,
I will never go.
That was my childhood. And I love that you keep that integrity, because I do think it's a big part of us. And imagine if we did grow up, you know, with our traumas as teenagers, because we all do, teenage years going into adult, it's just trauma after that. So if any young viewers are here, life changes at 12.
No, just stop there, stay there if you can, genuinely.
Right. So I think like now I try to schedule in time to just not do anything. To literally wonder and to play and to I don't know, to just be curious about something. I've been practicing recently, just like sitting by myself.
Yeah.
I told my partner this. We were at the airport and I was waiting for him to arrive in his flight. We were on separate flights. And I was like, I'm so exhausted. And, you know, we had been traveling all day, and I needed to ground myself because I was just feeling like nothing was doing it. I didn't want coffee. I didn't want anything. I didn't want extra stimulation. So I was like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to watch people because I love people. So I just sat for 30 minutes, put my phone away, did everything. And I just sat there like, and I didn't try to read a book, make it productive. I was just like, let me just sit. And it was so replenishing. Like I then took out my journal after that kind of 20-30 minutes that I was sitting by myself, and girl, the words just flowed out of me. Like my creativity was on an all-time high. Because I was just able to kind of re-up that kind of and I think that's what rituals do. And I think that's why I always express their importance. I said, because especially if you design them to be uniquely yours, they will re-up you. And each person is very different. My partner does not re-up the way I re-up, you know? So, and it's beautiful to see the way that we use that differently. And then I think the last thing I would say is looking at your own family dynamics and looking at maybe what you did with not only your mom and dad, but whoever you grew up with, and seeing what they did to slow down. You know, if it was they woke up at 6 a.m. and just drink a cup of coffee by themselves, you know, and stare out the window. Like maybe that's something you can try and see if it resonates, you know. A lot of it's trial and error too, right? And each day is different. But I think that those 2 points of just looking at your own individual relationship to what relaxes your system and what maybe your family did, because you'll resonate it. If it's something that brings you a little joy, you're just like, awesome. Like my sisters and I used to wake up and drink coffee together on the couch and just like talk for 2 hours, you know, and that brings my system such like it pulls me right into parasympathetic mode. Like I'm just relaxed.
Isn't it so insane how we've overcomplicated everything? Like I realized that today even, I mean, it's a lesson that's like just over and over coming up, but like I had like a 45-minute drive today and I was like trying to find like the best podcast that I could listen to, because I was like, it's almost as if any time that I spend where I'm not being what I deem productive, I like automatically equate to wasted time. And and that's not innately me at all, because who I am, I'm free. I block out time for wondering and curiosity, as you just said. Like that's who I am innately. But who I've like sort of been constructed to be, because I've like led this capitalistic life, is just I have to like squeeze meaning and productivity out of everything. If I had like a couple of hours in an airport, I would have made sure that like I knocked down everything on my to-do list, and that, you know, and it's the most freeing and liberating thing to come back to exactly what you were saying, who we were as kids, that just sort of like played with our own wonder and were led by imagination. And I think back and I was like, as a kid, I never dreamt of working. Like people would be like, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I was like, I had nothing. Like
working was not it.
I was like, I just was like, when I'm goal, I will continue to play, but I'll be prettier. Like there was no, like, I wasn't led by what I would like do. I was led by what I was going to be. And like, I think that's such an important lesson to come back to. And once again, I feel like Cacao has really, really, really taught me that very loudly as well. Like, there is nothing that you're going to take out, like, it's not going to further your career. Like, just being in this moment simply means feeling and connecting. And like, that is productivity. And so, and it's funny because earlier you mentioned sort of like what the spirit of Cacao has, you know, said to you. And so if you feel like, and sort of like personifying the spirit of Cacao, if there was something that sort of like that entity really would want to drive into our current culture, you know, what do you think it would be? Do you think it's like the idea of slowing down, probably?
A great question. Oof.
Channel her, honey. It's giving her.
Like,
I mean,
if I could speak for you.
Yes.
I at least it's so funny because right next door there's a bunch of kids playing right now, so it's fitting this conversation
I
so
know.
well. I think she would. I call her she.
Yeah,
She
same.
would
I was like, yeah, not to assume
the
genders,
woman
but
in me.
yeah.
I just
It's
feel like
it's
she's
so
so
Mother
connected.
Earth, you know?
Yeah, she feels very Pachamama-esque, or
Yes,
like, you
yeah.
know, one of Pachamama's daughters, like very, very of this earth. And I think it's just like, for me, the thing that always keeps coming to mind is returning to playfulness and returning to adventure. I think that we collectively are, at least here in the States, I cannot speak for anywhere else, but I also can see, I work for a global organization as well, so I can see the effects of capitalism spreading even to these remote areas. And I'm always like, no,
Yeah, stay pure. Yeah.
like stay pure. But I think she, you know, it's really, it comes back to the heart. So, and that's also why I'm wearing green too,
Yeah.
is that it's such a heart chakra focused type of energy. And when you are operating from your heart and really like tearing down those guards and those things that you put up to protect this area, it is such a joyful place to be. And it is so full of love, and it's something we've been taught to put so many boundaries around, and not necessarily boundaries that are good for us. They are boundaries that someone will come in and attack it. And I think that, I mean, I'm definitely learning boundaries as well. That's, I think, another lesson that I'm learning. But I think that the purity of just being present and opening your heart to the moment and tapping into those things that just brought you joy as a child, even as an adult right now, like we're so busy chasing things. And at the end of the day, I'm like, do you know why you did that? Do you know, like, you know, and myself included, folks.
No,
I think that I constantly, like you, I went for a drive today too and was like, what podcast can I listen to? And then I put music on and I was like, next track. I need to find the one that's for me. Like, I had to make everything so aggressive and frantic, right? And I literally came home frantic, and I had to just remind myself, like, everything's okay. That's another message I think she has. Trust yourself. Like, trust that you're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to enjoy yourself. You're allowed to be silly. And you may have people judge you. You may have people feel weird about it. But know that you're doing it out of space from your heart. Like, that's exactly where it's coming from. So if that's the space, everything else will kind of align, you know? Wow. So that's my message. I don't know. I hope I channeled her well.
I'm genuinely left speechless. And like, yes, I'm so dramatic always, but like, I think you were speaking directly to me. I feel like I haven't given, like, I genuinely feel like I haven't given, at least recently, I haven't given myself permission to like sit down. I've been in such a like, cause I've been in a really like solar plexus state, which has nourished a lot of me as well. But when you get into that hyperactive, like divine masculine Mars led space, you forget to shut it back off and come back down. And I've been feeling very frantic lately. And I think I really needed to be reminded by the earth goddess that you are. I'm like, you're channeling something very large, and I'm very excited to do reading for you because I'm like, girl, but just how blissful life can be when you are led by heart, and how like there's nothing to overthink when you are simply led by like just by that space. And yeah, if there's anyone watching who hasn't explored at the very least Cacao yet, I would say that's the very first thing to realize is that it's really going to put you in a really vulnerable heart space. And
that is the disclaimer for sure.
Yeah, but there's like bravery that comes within that, I think, because we found such safety and like the like places that we've like made a home in our comfort zones. Because I think there's a lot of comfort. There's also a lot of comfort in like which is a lesson that's come up for me a lot recently. Like there's a lot of comfort in always healing. That I think sort of like keeps you away from like living and being in your truth. And so it's almost like it's a push over the ledge, and like you kind of free fall into like, I don't know, this space of liberation. So I think it's been such important medicine, and it's really connected me to the women before me. And I just want to thank you for the role that you've played in it being what it is in my life. I'm actually going to make a cup right after this, and I wasn't planning on doing it, but I'm being led by body, honey. I am challenging my schedule. And I'm going to go to like a dinner afterwards. So I'm just going to be like crying, and people are going to be like, really just eating scallops. And I'm like, okay, but have you listened to your heart lately? But
I know.
Are there any last sentiments about just this entire journey for you and where it's led you and where you're going with it that you want to share?
I think even in what you're sharing, and just thank you for sharing your vulnerable position as well too, because I think it's brave, and we are all going through it all the time. I think if you are sitting there like, no, I'm not going through it, it's like you're probably not tapping into something, and it's fine if you're not. I mean, more respect if you're not, because girl, I wish I was there.
I wish I could turn this off. You think I don't want to be asleep? I want to be asleep.
But I think one thing that came to mind was, I think when you're leading with your heart, what I'm learning is that it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you can be compassionate enough to forgive yourself and others when they make mistakes, because we are, spiritual beings living in human bodies, on this human plane. And I think that we're all trying to figure it out. And I think that's the one thing. If you are having, kind of this, I don't know if I want to try cacao, that's very vulnerable, that's a lot. Absolutely no pressure to try it, because it is a very vulnerable space. But I will say, now having worked with it for a while, is that it leads you to really open up, your heart to everybody who is around you, and knowing that they're imperfect and so are you, and we're all just trying to figure it out together. So that sounds very kumbaya, but it's very true. And I have also always operated from a very masculine space. And then when I started getting into healing, I went the other way. It's like I went extreme. It was like, now everything is femininity and healing, and I got to go there. And lately it's pushing me to go the other way again, and just be like, okay, now go back to that side, go make some mistakes, and then come back, so we're constantly in this pendulum. And if you just learn to ride it versus like trying to force everything out of it, you might be okay. Like, also, we're here to do that, we're here to make mistakes, and I think that's probably the bigger message that Cacao's trying to give to people, is just like live a little.
Just live and like surrender that control and the like the safety that you find in forcing everything, and just like be okay with the unknown of it. I think that's wow, girl. I mean, maybe go ahead, tell me.
No, maybe that's my personal thing. I mean, my parents were great at slow living, but they also, their trauma was, they also have tried to control everything, down to their daughters, and, and like they just try to make sure we were going to be okay, that we weren't going to have anything happen to us. And all that anxiety and fear is stuff that I'm learning to let go of now as an adult. I'm starting to be like, okay, Stephanie may mess up, and so will her sister, and so will everybody else, and it's okay, because we're going to be there and support them no matter what, so
totally. And I think also they were probably in a space of like survival, and I think we're being liberated enough to like enjoy and like not like grasp for straws, right, to like actually, I don't know, be free in that. So I think that's just like Girl, I thought we were going to talk about like ancestors, and I'm sitting here like, this was actually secretly therapy. Love that for me. And it's really just, it's a reminder. It's a reminder of what we've always known and we've been forced to forget. And it's funny that it's come through a tradition that we've like culturally forgotten. And you're doing such a great job of reminding us. I think that, I think you are so in your purpose. You have no, like, just, you are doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. And I know that there is like a line of women like in this incarnation and beyond the veil that are like finally, thank God, bitch, how long was it taking for you? Like, they're almost
like my ancestors say that to me all the time.
I hear them. They're like, okay, girl, thank God, because we've been waiting on this. But like, I get it. You had to like, you know, have your journey. But no, thank you for standing in your power, because it's really it's you're leading by example, and you're really providing such a safe space. So thank you, and please let the people know where they can find you, and perhaps if you're leading any more ceremonies where they could join those.
Sure. I'm actually in the process of building up what this will look like on a regular basis.
Okay, good.
Because just to let everybody know, I'm definitely, and I might do a poll on my Instagram.
Nice.
I'm interested in seeing if people would like me, at least in the meantime that we're all still virtual, doing like live cacao ceremonies. Yep. And kind of really stripping the ceremonial part of it and just keeping it pretty,
don't even do the poll. Yeah.
Because that's something I do anyways with myself. So I'm thinking of hopping on every week to just kind of do an informal like ritual with people live. But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram. I'm currently at Steph Madrid. So that's, my full name is Stephanie Madrid, but Steph, STEPH MADRIDS. And then I also have a website, stephaniemadrid.com, where you can sign up to my newsletter, and I will actually be sharing some of my writing and some of my reflections that I'm coming up with as I drink cacao. So it'll be kind of these cacao notes / reflections that I'm going to be sharing. And anything that I'm listening to. You recently shared a mind-blowing ancestry podcast episode with me that I'm still trying to process. So
I haven't.
But stuff like that, like being like, I got this link from a friend, just kind of opening up community in that way. I feel like, especially online, I'm just trying to cultivate people who want to talk about the same things. So you can find me at either place.
Genius. Like that's post cacao, like any, like just like that stream of consciousness is cacao consciousness. I'm sitting here like, what do you name it? Like that's,
yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of a name. We may talk after this.
Well, talk. I mean, that's incredible. You are brilliant, and please, everyone, check her out. And whether you do so through her facilitation or just anywhere that you find yourself in, know that cacao is just a gift. It's Mother Earth's gift, and it's meant to be used with intentionality and with respect, but also with bravery. And just let yourself meet yourself. So thank you, my queen. Thank you all for listening. And that's it.